So first, I'm Lisa. I'm a lawyer here in Lisbon, but we work mostly in international projects. We have a lot of gaming projects. Before we were talking about MICA and regulation, but everyone's talking about that. You brought up gaming, so we can get the hook on this subject because you brought up some actually interesting points that we see with a lot of our gaming clients, to be honest. So let's start with the not so easy but most common part of it. Once we're talking about mass adoption, especially in Web3 and gaming, have been a big subject lately, more than now that we're starting to pass a bit of the bear market, have been a very big question. Most of our clients, and I mean most of the conferences that we have been lately, brought a bit of the same approach that he was talking before, which is it starts to be a bit more seamless. I think that one of the mistakes that the industry has made so far is trying to get the Web3 approach, this is a blockchain game, it's a blockchain-based fund, which is good for us as an industry, but at the same time it's quite bad on the sense that we had, for the non-Web3 users, they are a bit traumatized on the latest events. Once we're talking about Web3, people's mind goes straight away to finance. And when they go to finance, goes to the big finance schedules and the exchanges and all of that. So once you're not in the industry, people get a bit iffy, like, okay, I'm going to have a play-to-earn game on an industry that I don't know, buying a token that I have no idea what it does. If that's going to have any tax implication on my personal self, like, okay, let's say that I entered a game and I earned for whatever reason a lot of money, then what? We'll pay taxes on this. Where am I going to pay taxes? Am I passing any regulation? Is this a risk for myself personally? So a lot of questions start arising, okay? Once you think about traditional games, like once you enter an app and earn some money, these questions don't come to you because you got so used to that. And same with the internet. Like, we have protocols in the normal internet, and you don't think like, okay, I have to type HTTP -- 2 points, whatever. You just put whatever it is in the Google bar, and it appears to you. It's seamless. You don't have to think about the technology behind it. And I think one of the mistakes that the industry had been making is trying to make the technology so apparent, which for some products it does make sense, but once we're talking about games, for most of them it doesn't make sense. If you put a really good game on blockchain, it doesn't really matter if it's on chain or not for the normal user. They just want to have fun. They want to, well, have a seamless experience. And, well, if you can earn, you earn, but you don't want to be thinking about that. And then you go to the play-to-earn big dilemma problem once we're talking regulation, which is taxes. You're like, okay, I earned some money. Then what? I have to put it in the wallet. Most people don't even know how to create a wallet. So if you don't have a wallet integrated in the game, which now is starting to be more common, so once you log in, the game already create a wallet for you in your name, and it's hosted in the platform, so you don't have to, be connecting. But if you think about the early games, for you to enter, you had to create a wallet before, and then you had to integrate your wallet with the game you're playing. Like, what are the chances that a normal user that never had contact with any of this would do any of that? You would be like, this is either too much work, or I don't trust to be linking two platforms, or I'm going to have to create a specific wallet for this game because I don't know who those people are, and I don't want to link my normal wallet to this game, because we know that for a while we had a lot of scams, so you were connecting your wallet and it was being drained. So it's a lot of risks that once we are in the industry, some of them we kind of dismiss because it's so normal for us, and it's so, okay, I will have to connect my wallet and, go on with my life. I know that the game is blockchain based, so I'll be more safe or less safe depending on your approach with it. But for normal users, this honestly don't matter. They want to have fun, or they want to have a seamless experience, and that will depend on the other things. And then once we're talking about the builder side of it, there's a whole lot of new risks or risk analysis that we have to do once we are launching a game. The first one, and it's the big one for the games, is tokens. The games want to have a token. First thing is how to categorize this token. Now with MICA, we have a bit more parameters, but it's still not fully in place. So let's say, okay, You want to put a token. What is the characteristics of your token? Because a lot of those tokens actually get miscategorized, so it's actually a security, but it's being categorized as a utility or as a payment token. Each one of them is in a different box. Of course, you can have a utility token that also works as a payment and is a security or not. But the main point, once we're talking about games now, it's if you have a security token or not. And why is that important? Because if you're just building a game and you have a pure utility token, most likely your project will not need any kind of licensing, which completely changes if your token is considered security. Once your token is considered security, you need a license in 90% of the countries to launch your product. And then, licensing is a whole new nightmare, bunch of papers, you get regulated, you have to have the authorities approving your token, and well, you have to send reports and all of that. So not only is it expensive, it's time consuming. Most licenses will take somewhat between 6 to 9 months. The fast one. The slowest ones take more than a year. So that can really delay your product. And then once we are doing the risk analysis for this kind of games, the first thing is, do your token need to be a security? Most of the times, no. Or can this be this feature of your game can be launched after? So you can always launch your game now without this one feature, get the license if it's needed, and then launch this little feature in the future. You don't need to launch everything at once. Or do you want to do a complete DeFi kind of project and risk yourself? On the sense that if you don't have a company incorporated in the country, you don't have really how to apply for a license, unless you're applying your personal name, which is, no one's going to do that. So let's say that you say, I don't want to incorporate a company, let's put this in the kind of DeFi space. But then what happens is you start pushing risk to your token holders, which is something that happened with some DAOs specifically in the US. What they started to say is if you have any kind of governance token in your game, whoever is the token holder of those governance tokens are actually personally liable for whatever that's up there. So if you launch in a completely decentralized way, your users are going to have the risk of, the ones that at least have the kind of governance tokens, of being personally liable for anything that happened in the game. So do we really want that as developers, as builders? Normally not. So normally they will have incorporate, and then again, the builders are going to have to consult with local authorities to see if you need a license or not. Let's then consider that you don't need a license. He brought up the loot box or mystery box, as you call it. That's a whole new nightmare for lawyers once we're talking about gaming developers, for one simple reason. That can be considered gambling. And I'll explain that, which is a whole new problem that people don't think about it until the problem happens. What's the big thing on that? Once most of those loot boxes and mystery boxes, you have to pay for them. If whatever you get in those boxes is not the same amount, the minimum amount, so the same amount that you paid, you cannot receive, so you paid €2, you cannot receive anything in that box that is worth less than €2. Because if you do, that's considered gambling for gambling regulations. And then you need to have a gambling license for the simple reason of you want to launch a loot box. So, why would you do that? But people don't think about those risks. I have actually a gaming project that happened, and I think they were based in Dubai, and then they moved to PVI. So the first time they were moving projects to actually regions that did not allow gambling in the first place. So they had to move. In the end, they took out this feature on the sense of they made loot boxes that you cannot be empty or came with at least the minimum value that people were paying. But the problem with that is it's really hard once we're talking about cards or NFTs or something like that to have a minimum value. So how are you going to guarantee that if you pay €5, whatever card you take there is €5? So the project will have to back that up, saying in the moment that you want to sell, we can buy for at least the same value that you bought your loot boxes. But that costs money. If you're thinking about mass adoption, let's say that your game started having 100 million users or whatever, a lot of users, you have to have all of that money in your bank or in your back end of the operation, because if all of the users decide to sell at the same time, you would need to pay all of them at once. So it's a lot of little variables that when we're talking about gaming, we sometimes pass this risk analysis. But I think it's really important to avoid future problems and to avoid your game to actually breaking. Sometimes your company, your shareholders, depending on how you're building that. You sometimes, for one little feature, you can bring so much risk to your project that sometimes it's not worth it. Or for one feature, you can bring so much licensing and so much attention from the authorities that it's not worth it. And once we're talking about the regulation, the authority side, what they're really worried nowadays, most in the world, is about anything that can hurt the consumer, especially money-wise. So they're focused on consumer regulation and financial regulators. So anything that is doing exchanges and anything that, the consumer is buying. So if you want to do a peer game and if you want to do the whole gamification of it, you should focus on this part. Once you start adding those other features, you start embracing other areas that is not just pure gaming. And then it's where you have to start being very aware of your risks and planning ahead of time. Otherwise, you can actually be in very bad waters. And with that, we now have, we'll have MICA. And MICA was good on this. MICA is not great, it's not perfect, but was very good to lay out the base principles of it. So now, we will all have the same definition of what's a utility, what's an NFT, what's a payment token, securities. MICA is like, we don't regulate that, that's in the financial regulation, so see the other diploma. So we start at least having the same base concepts from when, especially when we were doing risk analysis before. What was happening a lot, we were having to see SEC, the US authorities, the SEC, and how they were doing, because whatever SEC does, it kind of backsplashes around the world, which is good and bad for a lot of reasons. But how the SEC see if it's a security or not, it's by a legal concept called how you pass. They have 4 questions. If you answer yes to those 4 questions, most likely your token will be deemed a security. It's mostly if it's derivative from the effort of others, if you have an enterprise involved, if you're going to have profit, expectation of profit out of it. Those are the big 3 ones. And if you answer yes to all of them, your token most likely would be a security. Europe does not have how we pass, but the commissions ask the same kind of questions. And this is so outdated. You have to understand that the how we pass was built to see security on the banking perspective of it, on financial institutions. It doesn't really grasp all of what's games and other tokens and security on Web3 perspective. So what started to happen is, we go around it. You can go around 1 or 2 questions and then your token will not be a security, but you'll be risking the SEC, as they did, going like, hey, I consider this. Why? Because yes, I consider that, we're going to have some changes. And it's something that Europe did not did that much, but I know some cases that the French regulators and the UK regulators actually issued some notes on white papers that were trying to see if their tokens were going to be security or not, and was actually very good papers. And they were commenting on the white paper of those games saying why they consider security or not, and why the parameters that they were using were different than financial institutions. So, that's a bit of the whole risk analysis on gaming. I don't remember if I have anything else on this topic. I don't think so. But I'm open to questions.
Okay. Any questions? Nice. Very interesting.
I just want to give an introduction. We are working on a project that's kind of like a blind box, and I really want to talk to you more about the implications of it, because we haven't launched it. We want to see how can we minimize the associated legal risks, if there's any.
On that, and actually something I forgot to say, and it's good in discussion. Of course, we can talk about it after, but we always need more details on the project to kind of comment on it. But one big thing is always start small. I know it's something really hard to do once we're talking about decentralized and Web3 and all of that. But for a lot of those features, you can geo-block. And by geo-blocking, you kind of, at least in the start, you can mitigate a lot of your risks. So let's say you want to launch your game full, and you know, okay, you don't mess with, you know, the big parts. Let's say Canada is a nightmare, more than the US, to be very honest. The regulators there are years ahead, and the problem is they know what they're doing. So, you know, the SEC, they give us some letters that you read it and you're like, this is nonsense, it's just a witch hunt. Once you read the Canadian authorities' reports, they are very good. They know what they're doing, so it's risky. So you start crossing out, you know, the big areas, and you say, okay, let's start small. If you need a licensing, start in countries that first don't need a license to do what you want to do, or in countries that the regulators are not so into the Web3 yet. So your risk is going to be mitigated. You can always geo-block those countries. If the user actually wants to enter, is what we call kind of reverse solicitation. So if you launch your product geo-blocked for the US here in Portugal, and you were able, in the authorities here say, oh, your token's not secure, your game's good to go, you don't need a license, you launch here. You geo-block the US. And a US user, you know, uses a VPN and enter your game, this is not really your problem. You know, you made everything that you could to mitigate your risk. You geo-block them. If they found you anyway, it's kind of, you know, their problem. So you have a lot of those little holes in it. So geo-block is a great feature. I don't know why people don't use more in the sense of, okay, let's start mitigating your risk. While you're pursuing other things, or while you're doing risk analysis in another country, you can geo-block them. And then you move, you know, a step at a time. You go in little steps. That always help as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. I wonder with MICA, are we going to have enough regulatory clarity for games, or there will be still like a lot of gray area and?
Yes and no. Let's start with that. How yes and how no is what I said. MICA is a great first step. Okay, MICA is not perfect, but it's an amazing first step. I am in a love-hate relationship with MICA right now for the simple point that MICA is supposed to be a base regulation, and we often forget that. What that means, MICA sent like the lay of the land, the concepts, and what happened is the countries, all of the countries in the European Union, they have to create their own legislation according to MICA to specific topics. You know, it's how it happens with most of the financial laws anyway. So you have the European Union regulation, and then each country built on top of that with the complementary regulations. So with MICA, I think is going to be better because it already established the lay of the land and already reduced a lot of the gray zones of what is what. So there's not many places for, you know, each specific regulation to go by the tangent. But the thing is, the legal side of it, especially or legislators in Europe as a whole, they're not very fast. So, and this happened, and this is a problem on two different perspectives. The first one, the market always moves faster than the legislators. So we have to first educate them, which happens a lot. And second, they have to stop acting on trends, which is something that is a whole different problem. Like, DAO was a trend, and everyone's like, let's create DAO regulations. Like, why you're doing that? This is not even your biggest problem. Why you're trying to regulate something that you know it's not touching anything that's that risky. Let's start with the riskier parts. Let's start with things that we actually need regulation. Because what I'm afraid with MICA is also giving the power to the countries to over-regulate. And that's a problem. We don't want to over-regulate because once you over-regulate, you struggle the market, and then, you know, it's not what we want. So we have to start reaching a bit of the sweet point of regulation, like, okay, let's get out of the big risks, the gray zones, and then we move from there. But the problem is we'll be very dependent on each country to be at least the first one to launch something out. Like, we can say that 3 months ago, the European Union passed also the regulation about tokenization. I don't know if anyone saw. And we were talking to, and I can give this example, to the Portuguese Authorities Commission on Tokens, and we were like, okay, we have a regulation, why now? Because they were the ones appointed to, you know, deal with this in Portugal. We're like, okay, why now? And they're like, I don't know. okay, great. We have projects. How do we put them ahead? And they're like, okay, on our side, we are dependent on the commercial registry, and the commercial registry is one of the oldest institution possible. If they can do everything on paper, they would. So now we're talking with with the registries itself. Like, okay, guys, you have to update your system. How are you going to do that? So you start entering on those little political parts that not always are in sync, or this is their first item on the agenda. And well, I think we are waiting for the first country in the European Union to do something about it. Once one do, the others follow. So our hope is like for different countries to regulate different parts of the MICA or Web3. So let's say, I don't know, Portugal start dealing with tokenization, France start dealing with the gaming part of it, Germany with the utility part of it, because if they all start regulating different parts, at least we start having parameters inside the European Union to the different parts and things move faster. But it's not what we're seeing as of now, but it's what we are hoping for in next years. I mean, MICA starts officially just in June next year for the stablecoin part of it on the timeline. And for most of it, just December next year. So I think until the middle of next year, we're not going to see much more movement on this. But after, I would say yes. But yeah, Portugal will be a bit late on the game. I mean, Prime Minister yesterday quitting was a whole new thing. We don't know how it's going to happen. They are now worried about the NHR and taxes and all of that. So will be a different part of it, but honestly, other than the whole political instability, this could be good for Web3 tax this year, because maybe we got another year of, well, exemption if it's not your primary source of income. So that's it.
Thank you.
So you talked about the loot box, saying that it will be considered as gambling.
Not always, but you can, yeah.
But so again, like I'm a Magic the Gathering player, and it's a very old thing. It's like 1993, and you can buy booster pack, which have some cards in it, and you don't know what those are, both physically and digitally. And to the best of my knowledge, they never got sued for offering gambling services. So why would it be different with crypto?
It's not different. It's about where the authorities are looking for it. If I launch an app today, like let's say whatever app, and you have 300 users, move, I don't know, a couple of thousand of euros, like the regulator has more to try to find and go after it. The risk is there. The regulator can at any time knock at your door and say, oh, you're gambling, you need a license, or here's a fine, or just shut your game off. Depending on the regulator, they are more or less kind of friendly in the sense of if they're going to fine you, if they're going to shut your product down, if they're just going to say, stop this feature and it's fine. So different countries will deal with this matter differently. But the risk is always there. It's not about if the regulator is going to act on it. It's about if you want to bear this risk or not. So how is different? The difference is the regulators are now very into Web3 because they saw risk and they saw a lot of money in it. So they're like, okay, let's go. Let's take a look at this project. We might have, score some money out of it. It happens. But it's not different at all. It's the same principle from traditional games to Web3 games. It's exactly the same. The point is just where's the median, where's the attention, and how much money is involved.
I'm just looking, they got 1 billion of revenue last year, and they've been operating since 1993. So I don't think the regulator have anything bigger than that.
Honestly, what I've seen a lot is there is some countries that this would be considered gambling. Yes, you just bear with the fine. The fine for you not having a license sometimes is like 50K. You make the calculations. I will have to pay a fine for 50K. I'll make $1 million of revenue. I don't mind not having a license and being fined every year. It's about being aware of the risk, choosing to accept or not the risk, and the consequences of it or not. You can always measure. Okay, if someone said you're going to prison, you'll be like, okay, maybe not. But it's like, okay, the regulator may give you a letter and say, take this down. Or you can have a fine that will be 10% of your revenue. It's like, a lot of people will be like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, they just pay and it's okay.
Yeah, exactly, it's fine.
Pillory taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this happens a lot. So it happens with the traditional industry, so it's no different from Web3. What we tell a lot of with our clients is we don't want to scare people off. We just want you to be aware of what can happen. It doesn't mean that all of the bad scenarios will happen at once, or even that they will happen at all. But we need you to be aware, because if it does happen, we need you to either be prepared or at least be aware that okay, this could happen, and not be like, no one ever told me that I was touching gambling regulation. Like, why are you guys doing this? Like, you should have.
And the player can.
No, the players don't have anything to do with that.
Don't have anything.
No, the players are
Even
just
they want
playing.
something with $5 and said, oh, this is worth
Yeah.
$5. I want to sue you because it's
Yeah, so-
gambling.
Exactly. So there is also that. How petty are your players? Is also the human being aspect of it. If you have a bunch of players that go complaining to the regulators, yeah, you most likely will receive some repercussions. If all of your players like, yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah.
This time put $2, receive 5. The next time I receive 0. Yeah, I'm fine with that. So yeah, it's a user perspective, and you as on the other side as a player. You don't need a license to go in a casino here.
Yeah,
You don't need anything. You're,
Yes.
you're just a physical person. It's the problem of who's offering the services in this sense.
Okay. Anyone else have a question? No? Okay, that's it. Thank you, Lisa.